Welcome to another in the series of our stories of famous and maybe infamous Cannon Falls residents. Want to, again, as always, acknowledge the crack staff that makes all the rest of us look good. Thank you guys for filming and editing. We're here today with Dick Dalton and Chuck Schofield, and I thought this was a great combination of two individuals who have long family histories of being in businesses on Main Street in Cannon Falls, and kind of like to start in the beginning of how their families got involved in their respective businesses, Scofield Drug in Chuck's case and the Beacon in Dick's case, and kind of start in the beginning and bring it up to present. So Chuck is to my right. We'll start with Chuck if you want to give us kind of the origins of Scofield Drug and how it started in Cannon Falls and which family members were involved.
Well, it started back in what my great grandfather and wife came to Cannon Falls in 1855 when their two sons were Wilbur H. Schofield and James Schofield, and those two started the Schofield Brothers store back in 1868, and they sold drugs, obviously, and wallpaper, paints, glasswares, books, dolls, few groceries, and that type of thing. And my grandfather, who was Fred, son of W.H., I think he spent a year in college down in Iowa, Drake, I think it was, and he came back, and he was the first, supposedly, I suppose, registered pharmacist in the store. And he, along with my aunt, who would be Fred's daughter, and my father, he graduated from the University of Minnesota back in 1922, I believe it was, and as a pharmacist. And they ran the store until my father died in 1959, and my mother obviously inherited the shares or whatever in the store with my aunt. And in 1971, I bought out my aunt and my mother, and I ran it until 1988, when I sold to Reed Qualley. He was a North Dakota pharmacist that had owned stores up there, and he seemed to be a good fit for what would come into town here. And probably everybody watching this knew Reed real well. He was a good guy, and he ran the store continuing as the way we tried to run it as we had the store for 16 years or so, or through the years. And that brings it up to about, I worked for Reed until about 3 years ago when I retired. And I had 55 years in working in the store, so I figured that was enough.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Your great-great-grandparents who came to Cannon Falls must have been some of the very first settlers then, weren't they?
I think they were. They came from New York, I've been told. I don't know too much history about them. But my great-grandfather and his brother James Schofield was the father of Myra Poe. And she, if you wanted to know history of Cannon Falls and so forth, she knew a lot of that. And her father was a botanist, and I keep getting screwed up on who did which. One was a botanist and had collected fossils and that type of thing, and his collection was on loan to the University of Minnesota of what grew around here and so forth. And W.H., my great-grandfather, was a geologist, and he was well known in this area too about all geology of this area. And he wrote some big volume. It was about 2 by 4, and about 2 inches thick, all about all the rocks and everything that he found in this area.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll get back to Schofields a little bit soon, but why don't we talk a little about the history of the Beacon, Dick? How did your family get involved in that? Was there a newspaper before the Dalton family became involved with it?
Yes.
There was, okay.
The Beacon started in 1876, and in 1880, the great grandfather, who was Silas Lewis, who lived in Iowa, came up here to see his friend, Dr. Conley.
Mm-hmm.
He took the train to Northfield, and he walked from Northfield to Cannon Falls. Mm-hmm. And so he bought the paper in 1880, 4 years after it was started. And then his daughter, who was Lucretia Lewis, was the editor after he died. And then my dad was the owner editor for a long time. After and then he worked with Lucretia in the paper. And then in 1963, I came into the picture, and I've been there ever since, outside of a couple of years where I took off. and so now my son Mike is the 5th generation of our family as the editor.
These are two pretty unique stories. I mean, I can't think of any other businesses in Cannon Falls that have quite that family history of that many generations. I mean, those are really neat stories. And I kind of remind, I mean, this is a little before both your time, but I'm thinking back of those dates of when the Beacon started, before your family got involved even, but they were covering the Great Cannon Falls fires, I suppose, that Scofield Drug was kind of the boundary point of where the fires ended.
Yeah,
I don't know, what kind of stories have you heard about those?
Well, you can still, if you go upstairs in the store and you open up a trap door, you can still see some charred timbers up there that were up in the roof. And what was the fires of
1880 and 1887.
They made
Two
their
fires.
stand there, because I believe that was the first stone building at the time. And they had a bucket brigade, and I don't know where they hauled the water from, but they'd haul the water upstairs, and my grandfather said they'd throw one bucket over themselves and then the other one on to keep the building from burning. And I think you've probably seen pictures in the Chronicles of Cannon Falls or something where the fire started and how it ravaged practically the whole town. No, there was some bad ones.
Yeah, and I'm assuming then it was your great-grandfather that actually built that structure then.
Right. They started out with a wooden building.
It was, okay.
Back in 1868. And at that time, it had been the post office also. And they tore that down in 1879, I believe it was, and built the stone building.
Oh, okay.
Where it is now.
So right before that first of those fires. I was thinking it was in the 1870s. It was 1880 was the first one, okay.
And that's where they made their stand, the fire department.
Great foresight to build that the year before the fire.
Yeah, right. And what else?
So most of those structures around that at that time were wooden, and
they just burned
block
to the
buildings
right,
after
down to
that
the
came
ground.
up after that then. Yeah.
Burned to the ground.
Yeah. And Dick, where was the Beacon located in those years? Obviously not where you are today. So what's the history of where that moved around from?
Well, it's been in several places. I've got a picture of Silas Lewis standing in the second story above what used to be Ben Franklin's store.
Oh, okay.
So it was up there, and then it moved to below Cannon Realty in the basement. Mm-hmm. That was Cardis's department store at the time. And then we moved in the mid-50s to where we are now, built the building and moved there in the mid-1950s.
Okay. So that up above Ben Franklin, that was Kid Duds at one time too, wasn't
Yep.
it? They
Yeah,
started
yes, it
kind of
was.
started there as well. So it's
Yep.
Interesting, upstairs at the store, we had Dr. Williams, when he first came to town, had his office up there.
really
And Merle Olson had his lawyer's office up there. And Dr. Doley, who was a dentist, had his office up there. And that was on the other end of the store was the telephone office. My grandfather, back in the days, built the first telephone office in town, or telephone company.
really.
And if you ever knew him, he always had a limp. He had fallen off a telephone pole and broke his leg or hip or something, and he had a pretty good limp the rest of his life. And they ran the telephone company for many years until they sold to Ed Miller
Okay.
and Johnny Robinson. And well, there used to be, to get up to Doc Williams' office, there used to be a long stairway in an alleyway that is no longer there.
I was trying to picture how you would get up there. but-
Yeah, and there was a stairway, and it was, from the street level up to the top was a pretty good climb.
Oh, sure.
So it must have been back in late 30s or early 40s. The store put an elevator in the back of the store. I don't know. A lot of people don't know it's there. They come in, and if we had the elevator down, they say, well, "What's that?" "Well, it's an elevator." I said, "Goes all the way up to the 8th floor." But it sure came in handy for people with fractures and
Sure.
heart patients who couldn't climb the stairs and so forth.
That the stairway that you talk about going up to the second story, they had the siren to ring whenever there was a fire.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And we used to go down there, push the button, and then run like hell, because Hiram Ellis always rang it at 6 o'clock at night.
Yep.
Well, we would go ring it, 3, 4, 5, whatever, and then run.
Yeah.
So he never did catch us.
You were fast. I remember your
yeah.
athletic days. Yeah.
Back in those days, the telephone operators were always up sitting upstairs at the switchboard. And whenever there was a fire, everybody called in, "Where's the fire? Where's the fire?" And there used to be a lamp on the bottom of those stairs with a red light in it. And if the red light was on, somebody had called in for help for the police, and Hiram would see the red light, and then he'd call in, and find out what's going on, where he was needed.
Wow.
Those were the days.
Do you think that upstairs was always kind of a separate kind of professional offices and
Yeah,
stuff up there?
it
even
was
from
for
the
many,
early
many
days?
years
Yeah.
until Dr. Williams moved downstairs in the building next door to the drugstore
Yeah.
to the south.
Merle Olson was up there for a long
Yeah,
time,
and then
too.
he moved in the back also.
So did both you guys grow up thinking, boy, this is what I'm going to do, is get into this family business, or
I was kind of pointed to it, I've worked in the store, even before college days. In high school, I'd go in there and mark goods and haul stuff down, paint and so forth down in the basement where we stored it. And we had an old shed out in back, and we'd have a 65-gallon drum of denatured alcohol, and I'd have to go out there and fill gallon jugs of denatured alcohol that they'd use to start these Jungers stoves and so forth. And people used it for cleaning windows and whatever. You didn't dare drink that stuff. It was pretty tough on you. It'd kill you.
what, did you try it?
No.
No.
You go blind.
But you went to South Dakota. You got a pharmacy degree.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure that, like many professions, I mean, what you needed to do and what they need to do today is so different
Oh,
than the.
I'd hate to go back to school now.
But thinking of your first family members in it,
Yeah.
maybe there wasn't. You think in the early days they mixed prescriptions even as
Nah,
such?
not
or-
a whole lot, I don't think. They sold mostly patent medicines, I suppose, Hadacol and all that kind of things, those deals. But then my grandfather, he did a lot of compounding.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad did, and we did too. Doc Williams had a lot of favorite, if you want to call them recipes, where we had to mix them up for him. I remember when we'd have a flu epidemic,
Mm-hmm.
he had a flu capsule that he had that you'd have to grind up tablets and powder them up real fine, and then you had to fill the capsules, and I've made a lot of those in my day, even when I was in high school.
I went to college at St. Olaf.
You
Where's
did.
that?
That's
St.
interesting.
Olaf.
Yeah.
You are Norwegian, aren't you? You can't. You don't know where you went to school even.
Scratch that out. I went to Gustavus, and
I thought, boy, you've been bragging about Gustavus for a lot of years.
and after I graduated, I worked for Leslie Paper Company for a couple of years in Wisconsin selling paper. And I was calling on print shops at the time, and that was just seemed to fit in with what I. So then I went to work in the Beacon in 1963, and that's when Lucretia Lewis retired.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our battles, the two of us, and my dad was there too, so he got involved sometimes. But it all worked out, and
You had kind of a nice fit. I mean, I knew your parents were great people, but I mean, George kind of did something different than you did, rather than stepping on his toes or vice versa, I think.
he was a printer.
Yeah.
And he never did like to be editor, but he was the editor for a long time until I took it over. But he didn't like, that part. He just wanted to be down where it was dirty, and so that's what he did.
Yeah.
Not much of that washed off on you, did it?
Well, I know how to run a press.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I did.
I'm sure you did some of that
Yep.
high school years growing up and doing
Oh, yeah.
whatever odd job there was to do,
Yep.
probably.
Yep.
And one of my favorite stories is when we first got married, and my wife first went to Schofield Drug. She said she came home and she said, "This guy said, 'Who are you?' right away." I think Chuck Schofield knew every person in town, but he asked them who they were. So that's you, and you were great at that. I mean,
I don't know hardly anybody anymore. When
Yeah.
you're not in the business
Yeah.
anymore, you don't meet the people,
Yeah.
which is a kind of a shame too,
Yeah.
because I miss that. But as my mother used to say, it's hell to get old. Older, not old, just
Yeah,
older.
just older. Yeah, but I think that's what a lot of the world in the small towns do miss, is that real personal touch where
Yeah.
everybody knew pretty much everybody, and that's even
Yeah.
though Cannon Falls isn't that much bigger than it was maybe in some of those years. Some of that has changed.
I think when I graduated from high school, it was about 1,500 people,
Yeah,
which isn't, 4,200 now, which isn't a whole lot more.
but how big was your graduating class?
47.
Okay, so that has increased quite a bit.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
and Dick graduated in about 50.
57
Seven.
from high school.
Yeah, and was a member of the world famous Cannon Falls High School basketball team that I've been told, by other people, I think won the state tournament, if I recall
No,
correctly.
we didn't win the state tournament.
It was a very good team, though.
A good team. Yeah.
Very good team.
Yeah, yeah.
And who were some of the other people on that team, Dick?
Well, Mickey Olson, Harlan Prink, Jug Johnson, Earl Benson from town,
Yep.
Daryl Quam, Dave Langsdorf, Arlen Millard.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Notable
Yeah.
crew, and probably came, in all seriousness, as close to boys basketball team going to the state as Cannon Falls has had. Maybe back in the era of single class, where
Yeah.
everyone played in one class of the tournament. So that was pretty exciting days. I think I remember listening to it on the radio as a wee youth, probably. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And our coach is still with us.
Yeah.
G-Roy.
Yeah.
He's living up in the cities in a high rise, and we've been to see him a couple times the last couple of years.
He must have just come to Cannon Falls not long before that era.
No,
He
yes.
came in '52, I think, the year after I graduated.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was part of those great baseball teams of that era, too. I mean, that's a part of Cannon Falls history.
Cannon Falls Bears.
Cannon Falls Bears that people forget, too. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, anytime there was a Sunday afternoon game, if you were in the cities or something, you had to get home to get to that ball game.
yeah.
Watch Gail Mayo pitch, you know. Interesting, a lot of fun times.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite recollections of being on Main Street? What what do you remember, good, bad, or otherwise, over the years?
Oh, so many things, you can't remember them all. The people, the different kinds of people that used to come in, you know, the crazy ones, and because we had every town has the same ones, I suppose.
Characters.
Characters, yeah.
A lot of characters.
Pete the Crow and
Chicago Ed.
Yeah,
Chicago Ed,
yeah.
I remember one time Luella Aggie worked for us, and she was putting some stuff up way up on top of a rack or stacking shelves or something, and Pete the Crow came in and right like that on her side, and he crowed at the same time, and boy, she turned around. Oh, I thought I was just going to hit him.
Oh, I'm
She
sure.
probably should have.
Probably should have, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Irvin King. He was another character. He came into, I think it was when Lundberg's had the furniture store, and he had an account there, and he came in with a stuffed owl, set it on the counter, and he wanted to put that on his account.
Well, Dick, the newspaper business, like the drug business, has certainly changed since the 1880s. Maybe run us through some of the history, and what do you see as the future of the newspaper business?
Ooh. Yeah, it used to be movable type, which I remember when I was a kid having to set a headline, and each letter had to be put into the stick, by itself, and then you had to form a word, and you had to form a line, and then you had to justify it and put it in a chase, and well, now it's all on the computer, and it's a lot easier, a lot simpler. Yeah, there have been a lot of changes in our industry. The internet, I think, has changed the lives of a lot of newspaper people. Mm-hmm. But there will always be a newspaper. I'm convinced of that. It's going to change, but no, we're doing fine.
Yeah, I've told many people I hope they don't quit publishing a daily paper until I'm gone, because I would be lost without one. That's
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been heck to meet deadline when you were doing all those letters by hand, wasn't it? That was late nights for lots of people, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday when we'd get done. Now it's 5 in the afternoon we're done. So it's a lot less time consuming to put the product out.
Yes.
What do you do in your spare time?
And that's always come out on a Wednesday, hasn't it? And us poor people in the country don't get it till Thursday. Of course, our news is pretty late. But how did that day historically ever get picked, I wonder?
I think it was to do about the merchants, because they used to, like Friday night used to be the big night, and it changed to Thursday, and so when the downtown open hours changed, so did the newspaper change.
Okay.
So it's been Wednesday as far as I can remember, but it was later. I mean, earlier on in the year.
pharmacy has changed a lot too with the computer era.
No, I'm sure, yes.
Back in the day, we'd get a prescription and you'd have to type the label on a typewriter and then fill the prescription, and you'd have to write on the bag. And now everything's pre-printed or printed on. You still have to print the directions and so forth in there, and it automatically bills the insurance company or whatever, which 90% are all prescriptions are covered by insurance nowadays, and you know if you're going to get paid or what you're going to get paid. And before that, I know I used to have a 8x11 sheet, and I think it had maybe 17 different spots where you had to type in the prescription number, the patient name, patient if it's a male or female, date of birth, and then the drug NDC number, which is like a 17-digit number. And the cost, or not the cost, but what you were charging, the whatever it was. And that was on one line. And I'd spend hours typing in those sheets like that. If you're going to get your money, you had to do it. And then you send them into the state or whomever. And you didn't know if you were going to get your money back or not, or they could reject them on any, if you had a number in the wrong place or something, you know. So it was really a big headache. And, the computers have taken care of all of that.
I suppose one thing it solved was trying to read what the doctor even wrote to begin with when someone brought it in.
We had one doctor, Dr. Mears in Northfield. Every prescription we ever got from him, we had to call up and ask him, what do you want?
What does this say?
Because you knew it was just scribble.
Yeah.
He died up in Lake Billsby out on a pontoon boat fishing or having a party out there, and he choked on a piece of meat and he choked to death.
Yeah, I remember that story, I guess.
He died.
I have to tell you a story about what the Beacon did to a local merchant back in the day. We had a guy named Sauer, Ed, that ran the Coast to Coast store. And he was a bit peculiar,
Different.
different kind of a guy. So this was in the days when we had movable type, and you could form a word just by putting a letter into it. So Ed ran an ad for toilet seats, and the caption was, "Sit with the best." and my dad just put an H in there, with the best. And we made one copy and sent it to Ed Sauer. And Ed came in the next day, he said, I'm ruined. I'm going to have to leave town. We had a lot of fun with that
No, I
one.
bet you did.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that one. Toilet seats.
I have some other thing I don't dare say on TV.
Yeah, you maybe want to cut that out. I don't know.
Well, I'm thinking of your billing in the drug business, but there had to be an era before everyone was self-pay, so you had lots of people on credit, I suspect, at one time. That had to be a interesting.
Like Ernie Swenson used to say, I've got a lot of 20-year-old 1,000-pound hogs running around the country, waiting for them to sell the hogs, they're going to pay me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of being in business, I guess. But
You know, it's a topic of current discussion about Main Street of Cannon Falls, and you guys have seen a lot of different businesses there over the years, and none of them lasted as long as yours, I guess, but some of them were mainstays that have been there quite a while, and then a lot of them have come and gone. Maybe just talk a little bit about some of those, you know, in the 50s or 60s that were there that...
Big John Willie fits them all. So.
Yeah.
Long or short, big or tall, John Willie fits them all.
That's right.
Seymour Kraft.
Crafts have been there quite a while, for sure. Yeah.
And of course, Eltoff's and Germsted's. And how many, back in those days, we had how many restaurants? Must have been six or seven of them.
Yeah.
And taverns and so forth. There had to have been 7 or 8 of those.
Yeah.
And 10 or 12 gas stations.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
and 3-4 car dealers. No, there aren't any.
yeah, like you say, with 1,500 population or
Yeah.
whatever, there was a lot more.
Yep.
And there was a time when the freeway went around town.
Yes.
A lot of people thought that was going to be the end of town.
Yeah.
But we survived. And
Yes.
Yep.
there were a lot of changes, but that's what'll happen again.
Yeah. No, I remember the era when the mall was built. That was going to be end of Cannon Falls too, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
didn't happen either. But Cannon Falls has always had some things that other towns haven't had, and rivers and
Yeah.
natural beauty, and hopefully that continues to bring people here.
You
for
know, I
years
was
to
in the
come.
store yesterday morning talking to the crew, and the guy walked in, and he said, "Can you call my dentist down in Missouri? I've got an abscess tooth, and can you call and get a prescription for him?" And I just started talking with him. He said, "You know, this is really a beautiful town.
Yes.
I just love going around here. I don't know where he was staying or if he visiting somebody or whatever, but that's what he said. He said that was a beautiful town."
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell them a story about Rudolph Johnson, is it?
Yeah, Rudolph Johnson.
Yeah.
He was a farmer out by Spring Garden farmer, White Rock rather. And he went over when Frank Tramsky had the garage over the Pontiac garage, and he had a pretty good bill rung up in there. And he walked in there to Frank, and he said, "Frank, can I charge 5 quarts of oil?" He says, and Frank said, "Absolutely not." He said, "You owe this bill here, and don't, till you get this bill paid here, don't ever come back." And he said, yeah. So he went out the back door into the garage and into Don, who was Frank's son. He says, "Frank says it's okay to charge up this 5 quarts of oil." So, okay, Don gave it to him, and he walked into the garage and the office there, and he was writing up the charge slip, Rudolph Johnson, 5 quarts of oil, and Frank saw that, and he said, "That son of a," he said, "he did it again." There are many stories of Rudolph Johnson.
Is
No.
he the one that always left his billfold in the other pants?
Yeah, no, up in the rafter of the barn, yeah.
Good place, safe place for it.
Yeah. Well, when you gotta go, you know. I think Norris Johnson was a neighbor to him out there, and I imagine when he died, I don't know how many gallons of gasoline he owed Norris.
Oh. One of Dick's current projects, I know, is working on the history of the Cannon Valley Fair, which is 100 years old this year.
Yes, it is.
What have you discovered about that to date? I know you want to save the important information for the press here, but
Starts next week in the paper.
starts next week.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, the years that they had, hot weather, the crowds were down, or if it rained, the crowds were down, but there were always 25,000 people at the fair. But no, it's an interesting project. I'm almost done with it. And there's been a lot of fair presidents, a lot of grand marshals of the parade. Those are all in the paper starting next week.
Yes, just look for that.
Be sure you get a copy.
Did you ever find out what happened to the log house?
No. What happened to the log cabin that was there for the first fair that had the name of an old settler on each log?
Ah,
I don't know what happened to the log cabin. It's gone. Nobody knows what happened to it.
so do people actually remember it or just have seen
I haven't
pictures of
talked
it?
to anybody that remembers it.
Okay. And that's always been the site of the fairgrounds for all 100
Yes.
years?
Yes.
Did the fair board purchase a piece of land? Is that how that started? I suppose.
They must have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was.
The track was always in the same place.
Does that harness racing date back to the
Yes, it
very
does.
beginning?
Yes, it does.
It does. Yeah, that's known for that for sure.
Yep. You were never on the fair board, were you?
one I've never been on, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe it's not too late.
No, yes it is. Richard King,
Yeah, he used to live there.
yeah, he was a caretaker. He was another town character. He was coming and said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "No, I don't think so." I said, "I know I'm not. I got the paper to prove it." He was in Rochester State Hospital for a while. Poor guy. He was a really nice old guy. He'd ride his bike into town, from the fairgrounds.
Were you guys around when Haile Selassie came through town?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's one of the, Chuck should probably retell, that's one of my all-time favorite
Marva
Cannonball
Dean
stories.
and
Oscar.
Paulred, and that was a pair down there, I tell you. They got a hold of Clint Lundberg's, wasn't a hearse, it was like a stretch limousine, wasn't there, type of deal
Yeah, I
back
think
in
so.
those days?
Yeah.
And Haile Selassie was supposed to come through town at 11 o'clock or something like that. So they got Clint's vehicle, and they got a Fez from Osmond, whatever it is, and they fixed up a deal in the back seat of this deal, and I think they even had flags on the fenders.
Oh, yeah.
And drove through town, and they said, here he comes, and everybody come running out to see Haile Selassie. That's when the highway went right through town.
Yeah.
Oscar Pollard, he was something else too. I remember one time Ernie Klaus had the blacksmith's shop right next door to where the dairy bar. What were the fire halls there now?
Yeah.
Anyway, the dairy bar, and he was going to get some acetylene from a acetylene tank, and he'd go in and have coffee, and he was going to pour that in a coffee cup, and then he was going to light it and say, "Man, that's some really hot coffee." and Oscar got wind of this. It was going to happen, so he went down to the fire hall and bought one of those big soda ash fire extinguishers.
Yeah.
Put it down below the counter, and Ernie lit his coffee, and Oscar it said the whole place was just full of the white powder. He blasted the coffee right out of the cup, of course. Another time, Gene Flum came in, in a hurry. He said, "Give me a cup of coffee," and he laid a $100 bill down on the counter. Oscar picked it up and walked over to the cash register and put it in there, and he took a counter check off, and he wrote a check out for $99.90. Gave it to Gene. Gene thought he'd get a free cup of coffee if he gave him a $100 bill. So come time for Gene to get his money back on the check, he went up, I think he wrote it on the Security Bank, and he went up there and said, "I want to cash this check," and said, "Well, he doesn't have an account here." That's a true story.
Yeah.
Oscar had a slogan back in the day: "If you're licking your fingers, it's Colonel Sanders. If you eat the chicken, it's little Oscar."
Oh, yeah. It's not bad.
No.
Yeah.
They'd have a March of Dimes deal down there every year, and they'd have Abner Benson and Alvy Martinson, I think it was. They one played a squeeze box, and the other one played guitar or something like that as the entertainment. And they'd have had a wire across, and everybody would donate $1 or whatever it is, and they'd attach them to the wires. And I think it was Scriver, not Hiram.
Mm-hmm.
Art Scriver came in with a $10 bill, and he was expecting change. He never got it. Never got any change back for the $10 bill, and that was a lot of money in those days.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Girls would come in there selling magazines, and Oscar would pick up the slip and said, "I'll take that one, I'll take that one, this one, that one." And said, how much is it going to be? Said they'd add them all up. Well, $50.55. I said, see that guy over there in that gas station? I said, that's my dad. He said, you go over there and you'll pay on it. And they'd go back and forth on that.
That was Marv, no doubt.
It was Marv Bodine,
Yeah. You guys both went to school in the old school in Cannon
Old school,
Falls.
yeah.
Have Fond memories of that.
Yep.
It's still there at least.
Graduated in '51. We played basketball in just half of the gym, you know. Where did you get? You were in the full gym, weren't you?
Yes, we were.
Because that gym wasn't that actually built in the 30s or something, or am I wrong?
Yeah, I think so.
But you did only in half of it, really. I didn't.
Had the stage up there. They had bleachers in the stage, on the stage rather, and then on the other side they had kind of a raised platform where they had chairs set up in there for basketball games.
I know we used to sneak into the school on a weekend to play basketball, and we would climb up the fire escape to Miss Cole's room, where we made sure a window was open, and then we'd crawl in and go down and play basketball.
Yeah. That was before every weekend activity. The school was full of people doing something now,
Yeah.
but that's.
Yeah, they'd lock it up and that was it.
No, even in my era, some of those gyms were, I think St. Charles had a little bandbox of a gym. I'm sure a lot of those you guys played in weren't.
Kenyon did too.
Yeah, weren't too much.
Used to play up in Randolph, and that was really small. The Randolph gym. They had the chairs on the side of the, right up next to the wall.
Yeah.
And then the floor was right here.
Yeah, it could be a little dangerous.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess it was better than when my dad used to play ball up, I don't know where they played, somewhere up, was it up over the
Lee Chevrolet.
Lee Chevrolet,
Was
maybe?
it there at one time, probably? Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, this has been really fun. I don't know if you guys have any stories you want to tell on each other before we quit here. Or?
Well, he's so much younger than I am. That
His memory's better, maybe.
Many good times,
Yeah.
good friends.
Male chorus days when we were both in the male chorus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know you've done a lot of singing together.
Yep.
Still singing together in the church
Yes.
choir.
You could finish us out by carrying a tune, probably, but
Well, if I could
No.
keep him on pitch, maybe we could do it.
He used
Oh,
to
Dick.
say that at Ken Altoff too.
If you can't have fun, what's the use of doing it?
yeah,
huh?
no, and you guys have had a lot of fun and made a lot of fun for other people too. So
I remember back in the day when we were in high school, I think, like on a weekend, we didn't know what to do. So we would drive around and we would drive down the main street, make a U-turn by the Catholic Church, and then drive back down all the way, turn around and come back, and just do that all day.
Yeah.
Drive around. The main drag.
That was back in the day. Cruising.
cruising, yeah.
Yeah.
Go out to where the old Imperial Station was. That's what's out there now. It's closed.
Yeah.
The Cannon Auto Body.
Yeah.
Go out to the Y and turn around there, and then
Yep.
go down to the.
Yep.
Used to be a Shell station on one corner and the Standard on the other.
Yep.
Make a U-turn there. By Cannon Electric motor
Yeah,
repair.
Yeah, that's how you got to learn Main Street so well. Huh?
Yeah, right. A lot of
thank-
changes.
Yeah, thank you both for coming in and being part of this. Appreciate that. And
Pleasure.